Are you ready for a journey through time that will take us back 12,000 years? This is the epic tale of the dire wolf, a vanished giant that once ruled the lands of North and South America. Welcome back once again to my channel, Extinct Stories. But before we begin our journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss an adventure. So, let's begin today's journey. About 12,000 years ago, the Earth looked nothing like it does today. In North America, the land was ruled by ice. Cold winds swept through every direction, rattling the branches of ancient trees. As far as the eye could see, thick blankets of snow and ice stretched endlessly, with the blinding glow of sunlight reflecting off the frozen surface. Life was harsh here. Survival was a daily battle. Even for the mightiest creatures, across the vast plains, woolly mammoths slowly marched in great herds, their towering tusks glistening in the snow, each heavy step shaking the frozen earth. In the dense forests, mastodons stripped the bark off trees with their massive trunks and powerful jaws. Out in the open grasslands, prehistoric horses and bison thundered across the ground in vast herds, their hoofbeats echoing for miles. The world was full of life, but every creature lived under constant threat. For where there were herds, there were predators. Among these predators were the saber-toothed cats, the legendary Smilodon, whose enormous curved fangs struck terror into every animal they encountered. American lions, even larger and stronger than today's African lions, prowled these frozen realms as apex hunters. But there was another predator that outmatched them in fearsome reputation: the dire wolf. At first glance, the dire wolf looked much like the modern gray wolf, but it was a beast of another scale. Bigger, stronger, with bones built thick like armor, and jaws so powerful they could crush bone with ease. Yet, their greatest strength was not in their size, but in their unity. Dire wolves never hunted alone. They lived, fought, and killed as a pack. That was their ultimate weapon. Picture this. Across the icy plains, a herd of bison charges forward, their hooves pounding like drums across the frozen land. Behind them, the dire wolves give chase, their eyes blazing with hunger, their bodies cutting through the frigid wind. Each wolf has a role. Some drive the herd from the front, forcing the bison to turn. Others flank them from the sides, while the rest attack from behind. Slowly, with precision and cooperation, they isolate a single bison from the herd. Once separated, the prey's fate is sealed. The pack swarms, and the hunt ends in a storm of fangs. This was a terrifying sight for any creature, because a dire wolf attack was as sudden and deadly as a lightning strike. Once surrounded, there was almost no chance of escape. That is why the name dire wolf brought fear across the Ice Age plains, but life here was never easy. Every day posed a new challenge. Catching prey was hard enough, but holding on to it was another battle. Often, Smilodon or American lions would swoop in and try to steal the wolves' hard-earned kill. In these deadly standoffs, numbers were everything. The larger the dire wolf pack, the better their odds of defending what was theirs. Yet, the world was beginning to change. Slowly, the bitter cold gave way to a warming climate. The thick ice sheets began to melt, rivers carved through the earth, and forests stretched farther than before. The landscape looked beautiful in this transformation, but for the great beasts, it was a silent disaster. One by one, the great herbivores of the Ice Age mammoths, mastodons, and giant bison started to disappear. And as their numbers declined, so too began the downfall of the predators that depended on them, including the mighty dire wolf. The life of a dire wolf revolved entirely around the hunt. Each day, their survival depended on how skillfully they could bring down prey. On the vast, frozen lands of Ice Age North America, food was never guaranteed. The true strength of the dire wolf lay in its pack. These wolves lived not just as hunters, but as a family. Every member had a place, and every member mattered. After a kill, the wolves would feed together, even the old or frail wolves, those who could no longer hunt, that were never abandoned. The pack ensured that they, too, had their share, and if one of their own was injured, the others stood guard, protecting it from danger. It was this unity, this unbreakable bond, that made Dire wolves, such a formidable force. Imagine a scene on a freezing night. Silence blankets the land, broken only by the whisper of an icy wind. With no fire to bring warmth, their only heat comes from the closeness of their bodies. The dire wolf pack sits together, their breath forming white clouds in the cold air. In the distance, the haunting call of a bison echoes across the plain. Instantly, the pack lifts its heads, ears standing, eyes glowing with anticipation. For them, this was life itself. Hunger and the hunt, struggle and solidarity. But survival meant more than the hunt, that it also meant competition. Across the snowy plains and shadowed forests roamed other top predators. Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, and a massive American lion whenever a dire wolf pack brought down a large kill. These rivals were never far behind. A single Smilodon, with its saber-like fangs, could deliver a fatal strike. An American lion, far larger and stronger than any wolf, was an even greater threat. Yet, once more, the pack was the dire wolves' greatest defense. Time and again, when the big cats tried to steal their kill, the wolves relied on their numbers and teamwork to drive them back. But nothing in nature stays the same forever. Slowly, the Ice Age began to fade. Glaciers melted, forests expanded, and the world grew warmer. The change first struck the great herbivores, the mammoths, mastodons, and giant bison, which had once ruled the plains. One by one, they began to vanish. With their disappearance, the wolves' world began to collapse. Big prey became scarce, and dire wolves were forced to hunt smaller animals. But these smaller kills were not enough to sustain the massive appetites of an entire pack. Survival grew harder with each passing year. The struggle deepened and the age of the dire wolf approached its end. The end of the Ice Age was nothing short of a curse for the world of the dire wolf. The transformation was slow, but its effects were deep and permanent. For thousands of years, vast lands have been buried beneath ice and snow now. They began to thaw. Rivers swelled with melting water, and forests stretched wider than ever before. Where once there had been endless sheets of ice, fresh grass and trees now spread across the landscape. It looked beautiful, but for creatures built for the frozen plains, it was the beginning of the end. The mighty mammoths and mastodons, whose enormous herds once dominated the land, slowly dwindled in number. In their place came smaller, swifter animals like deer and ancient horses. For herbivores, this shift brought opportunity, but for predators, it meant disaster. Dire wolves had evolved to hunt in large packs, bringing down enormous prey. But now, the great beasts were disappearing. Smaller animals were harder to catch, they were faster, more alert, and required a very different hunting strategy. And even when caught, they simply weren't enough to feed an entire pack. Hunger began to break the wolves' unity. Packs grew desperate and more aggressive. They no longer hunted only bison or horses. At times, starvation drove them to turn on one another. The weak, the old, even injured pack members sometimes became prey themselves. This was the darkest chapter in the history of the dire wolf. And in this changing world, a new rival entered the scene: humans. Slowly, people spread across North America. They had not only the power of fire, but also sharpened weapons and keen intelligence. Hunting together in groups, humans learned how to bring down massive Ice Age beasts with cunning strategies. Wherever dire wolves and humans crossed paths, the outcome was certain. The wolves were fierce, but human cooperation and tools proved stronger. Together, climate change and the rise of humankind sealed the fate of the dire wolf. The mighty predator that had ruled the Ice Age plains was now driven to the edge of extinction as the ice sheets retreated. Lush forests spread across North America. Places that were once silent, frozen plains now echoed with the rustling of leaves and the calls of birds. The land seemed alive in new ways, vibrant and green. But for the dire wolf, this change was no blessing. That it was a nightmare. On open plains covered in snow, their speed, teamwork, and pack coordination gave them an enormous advantage. In dense forests, things were very different. Prey could vanish in an instant, darting between trees and thickets. There was less space for a pack to move together, making it far harder to organize an attack. The hunting strategies that had served them well on the icy plains no longer worked. Forests were full of smaller, faster animals such as deer and rabbits' prey that could slip through the trees and escape with ease. Hunger and frustration began to grip the packs, and the challenge wasn't only about prey. The forests gave rise to more threats. American lions became more active here, their immense size and strength proving deadly for wolf packs. A single lion could overpower a small group of wolves on its own. Saber-toothed cats, like Smilodon, now had even better cover. They could hide, stalk silently, and strike from the shadows. For the dire wolves, every day became not just a struggle for food, but also a fight for survival. Meanwhile, humans were adapting rapidly to this changing world. They crafted tools from wood, used fire to secure their surroundings, and drove animals into traps or over cliffs with clever tactics. Time and again, wolves clashed with humans, but the result was always the same. Humans emerged victorious. Unlike the wolves, humans outmatched them not with stronger jaws or greater numbers, but with intelligence, cooperation, and strategy. The true strength of a dire wolf was always its pack. But as food grew scarce and pressure from humans and rival predators increased, even that unity began to crack. Once, every wolf would fight to protect its kin. Now, hunger began to change everything. Hunts often ended in failure. Packs would return empty-bellied and go hungry for days. The older wolves, weakened with age, were no longer seen as essential members. They became burdens. Sometimes they were abandoned, and in moments of extreme desperation, some packs turned on their own. The injured, the sick, or the old could become prey themselves. It was cruel, but in nature, survival shows little mercy. Still, not all packs collapsed. Some adapted, breaking into smaller groups. They learned to hunt smaller prey that could at least provide some food, even if it wasn't enough. Others ventured near early human camps, scavenging for scraps of meat or bones humans had left behind. But this was dangerous. To humans, dire wolves were threats. Whenever one came too close, it meant the deadly sting of a spear or an arrow. The glory of the dire wolf was fading. Life in the pack was no longer the proud, united battle for the Ice Age Plains.it had become a relentless struggle, with each day bringing a new test. The confrontation between dire wolves and humans was one of prehistory's most defining battles. Humans proved to be the deadliest predators of all. Unlike wolves, they didn't rely solely on strength or numbers. They relied on intellect. They devised plans, built traps, and harnessed the power of fire to control their environment. For the wolves, this was a kind of warfare they had never known and could never win. Archaeological evidence shows that humans sometimes killed dire wolves directly, not only to protect themselves, but also to keep their food secure. Wolves often tried to claim human kills, and humans would not tolerate such competition. As humans spread across the continent, they hunted everywhere they settled. Food supplies dwindled further for predators. Even though human populations were relatively small at the time, their intelligence, tools, and strategies gave them dominance over the entire landscape. For the dire wolf, this clash proved fatal. Between the warming climate, vanishing prey, and the rise of humankind, their long reign as Ice Age hunters was drawing to a close. As the Ice Age drew to a close, the balance of predators across the earth began to shift. With the retreat of the ice, the vast grasslands shrank, replaced by spreading woodlands and dense thickets. In these forests, smaller and faster animals thrived. Alongside humans, other predators, cougars, jaguars, and American lions were gaining strength and dominance. The dire wolf, built for chasing down massive prey across open plains, began to fall behind. Their heavy bodies and coordinated hunts were less effective in this faster, more agile world. Across mountains and valleys, smaller packs wandered in search of food. Once they relied on mammoths, bison, and horses. But now, they were forced to chase deer and other small animals. Yet these quick prey darted easily between trees and underbrush, often escaping, leaving the wolves exhausted and empty-bellied. Meanwhile, Other predators adapted more easily. Lions and cougars could climb trees, stalk through thick vegetation, and ambush smaller prey with sudden deadly strikes. Humans, however, proved to be the most cunning predators of all. They studied the movements and patterns of animals, hunted in organized groups, and used fire to control the battlefield. For the dire wolf, this new world was unforgiving, and their old strategies no longer worked. Hunger is a power that can break even the strongest of creatures. For the dire wolf, it became the ultimate test. As the Great Ice Age prey disappeared, life grew harsher with every passing day. Sometimes, wolves went for days without food. Their ribs pushed sharply against their skin, their eyes dimmed, and the cries of starving pups echoed through the pack like a haunting call. In their desperation, discipline shattered. Packs turned on themselves. Older or injured wolves were left behind, or worse, killed and eaten by their own kin. Yet some packs held on. They transformed their hunting patterns, learned to corner smaller prey, or scavenged near human settlements, surviving on scraps of meat and bones. But the risk was immense. Humans saw them as threats. The moment a wolf stepped too close, spears and arrows found their mark. Hunger stripped away the dire wolf's power. More than any rival, it was starvation that pushed them closer to extinction. The story of humankind proved to be the decisive factor in the fate of the dire wolf. Humans were smarter and more adaptable than any other species of the time. While dire wolves survived through strength and numbers, humans survived through strategy and innovation. They mastered fire, crafted sharp tools from stone, and invented new hunting methods. Working in coordinated groups, they didn't just chase prey, they outthought it. Some human hunts drove entire herds of animals toward cliffs, trapping them in mass kills that no predator could rival. Population by population, humans spread across the continent. They not only targeted the same prey as the wolves, but also claimed the wolves' territories. Food sources dwindled, and the dire wolf found itself with fewer and fewer options. At the same time, humans began to settle, establishing some of the first permanent villages. They experimented with early farming and domestication. Wolves' smaller relatives, ancestral wolves that would one day become dogs, were brought into human camps, fed, and bred as companions and hunting partners. While those wolves adapted and found a new place in human society, the dire wolf remained wild, hostile, and forever an enemy. This divergence marked the turning point, an ancient fork in the path of history. Every species has its time. The dire wolf had ruled North America for nearly 250,000 years. But when the world around them began to transform, their fate was sealed. The melting of the ice, the spread of forests, the decline of great prey animals, and the relentless rise of humankind combined into a deadly storm. Slowly, the mighty packs grew smaller. The howls that once echoed thunderously across endless plains became rare, fading into silence. Once, dire wolves ran for hundreds of miles in pursuit of colossal prey. Now, they struggled merely to survive. Against humans with fire, weapons, and organization, they stood no chance. At last, around 12,000 years ago, the dire wolf vanished from Earth. Unlike their smaller relatives, the wolves and dogs, they left no living descendants. Where dogs adapted to human partnership, dire wolves perished as wild relics of a harsher age. The extinction of the dire wolf was more than the loss of species. It was a lesson carved into the history of life itself. In nature, those who fail to change cannot endure. The world was changing, and time was no longer on the side of the dire wolf. The massive ice sheets that had blanketed the continent for thousands of years had retreated. Rivers surged with new life, forests spread far and wide, and the endless plains once teeming with enormous herds shrank to scattered fragments. These were the lands that had once been the kingdom of the dire wolf. But their empire was now broken into pieces that in this new world. Only small, scattered packs still fought to survive. One such pack, made up of a few aging wolves, young hunters, and fragile pups, wandered the edge of a valley. They had gone days without food. Once their howls had echoed across the frozen wilderness with unmatched force. Now, their voices were weak, ragged, and weary. The elders struggled to breathe, while the pups whimpered, their mothers powerless to feed them. One moonlit night, the pack spotted a distant herd of deer. The young wolves' eyes lit with desperate hope. They crept forward in silence, but the deer were alert. At the faintest sound, they bolted like lightning and vanished into the forest. Exhausted, the wolves collapsed, too drained to pursue. It was as if the very earth whispered that their time was over. Gradually, the pack broke apart. Some starved, others fell into human traps. The rest staggered on alone, until the dire wolf disappeared forever. When the dire wolf was gone, the world felt different, quieter, emptier. For centuries, their howls had rolled across the icy plains and valleys. Their charging paws once shook the ground as they brought down giants. But now, silence reigned where their voices had once filled the air. Their absence reshaped the ecosystem. Without the dire wolves to keep balance, populations of large animals grew unchecked, and smaller predators like cougars and coyotes spread across the land. Slowly, humans claimed these areas as their own. The earth, without its dire wolves, felt incomplete. Yet perhaps this was nature's eternal law. Those who do not adapt cannot remain. The dire wolf relied too heavily on strength, size, and the unity of its pack to survive. Their smaller cousins, the gray wolf, and their closest human-bonded relatives, the dogs, found ways to thrive in the new age. But the dire wolf remained only in history, vanished into the dust of time. Though dire wolves vanished from the earth, they lived on in human memory. Early people, who once saw these predators with their own eyes, carved their images on cave walls. Sitting around fires, they told their children stories of the great wolves that hunted in terrifying unity. In many cultures, the dire wolf became a figure of legend, seen as both mysterious and fearsome. Some tribes remembered them as symbols of death, others as guardians of the wilderness. Their howls inspired both fear and awe in the human heart. Even today, when scientists study their bones preserved in tar pits and frozen ground, they imagine what it must have been like, dozens of wolves running together across the land, their eyes burning with ferocity, their breath misting in the cold, their teeth flashing like blades. That vision still sparks wonder and excitement. Modern science has revealed the dire wolf's story more fully than ever before. Their ancient bones, preserved in tar and ice, gave researchers a window into their lives. Skulls, jaws, and massive teeth told the tale of extraordinary hunters capable of crushing bone and devouring marrow. Yet the greatest revelations came from genetics. DNA studies revealed that dire wolves were not merely oversized gray wolves. They were an entirely separate lineage, older, unique, and now completely extinct. This discovery shocked scientists who once assumed they were simply larger wolf cousins. Instead, the dire wolf belonged to its own evolutionary branch, one that has vanished forever. This realization underscores the immense complexity of nature and forces us to reflect on the role of humans in either preserving or destroying the diversity of life on our planet. The story of the dire wolf is not just about the extinction of a predator. It is a timeless reminder of the fragile balance on which Earth depends. When climate shifts, when prey disappears, when humans spread and dominate, the mightiest creatures can fall. And yet, their legacy remains all around us. Every time a wolf howls or a dog answers, there's an echo of the dire wolf in those voices. They survive in our imagination, in our folklore, and in the fossil record. Most importantly, their story carries a lesson. Strength alone is not enough. Adaptation, resilience, and change are the true keys to survival. The dire wolf could not change, and so it vanished. But its memory endures, compelling humanity to ask the most vital question of all: how will we adapt and how will we treat the natural world in which our own survival depends? Thanks for watching video, and good night.